part. It's not going to be so much of what Kim's talking about unless you know that ahead of time. It's going to be just the waking up, emergence kind of airway obstruction. So the biggest thing about that is it's usually their tongue. Your tongue's falling in the back of the throat. If they have sleep apnea, you know, it's the same thing. Like there's some obstruction that's going on. So the biggest thing to think about when you're putting in an oral airway or a nasal airway is that you want to make sure that it goes far enough back that it's going to help to pull that tongue forward, right? So putting it in an adult, the first thing you want to do is kind of measure the size. So when you put the size up next to them, you want to make sure that the end of it is going to be far enough back that it's going to actually affect that tongue. So you see like this red one is pretty much a good size for like most men, some women that have larger jaws. This one we usually do on kids, and you see here, it's not going to go far enough back to really be able to help out with that tongue. So that's how you can kind of gauge what size you're supposed to do. Same thing applies to the nasal ones. Everybody wants to use a smaller one because it's less intrusive as you're sticking it down someone's nose, but it's not going to do any good. Same thing as if it's not long enough to get back there, it's not going to help. So you want to measure it and make sure it's going to be long enough to get where it needs to be. So with the oral airway, when you're inserting it, these aren't the best dummies for actually showing insertion. There's a couple of different ways that you can do it. If they're asleep enough that I can put a tongue blade in, I find that to be the most helpful. Put the tongue blade back kind of far in their throat so that you get it in the back of their tongue, and you can kind of use this to help scooch their tongue forward. So I use that to help to scooch the tongue forward, and then I can slip this oral airway in place. Sometimes still they might be obstructing, so once you get the oral airway in place, use both your hands and just pull that jaw and everything forward. So again, like this will help to let it set back behind the tongue and kind of land back there. If you're using a nasal airway, lube is your friend. You always want to lube it up as much as you can so that it will slide in easily. As you start to introduce it, you're just kind of following the line of the nasal passage back. If you hit some kind of resistance or something, then you just kind of want to try to walk it off the back of whatever the resistance is. You can twist these and that'll kind of help to get it into the right place too, but never force it, or else you'll end up like giving them a terminal that they may not want. When you're using, I'll show you on the kids for this one. When you're doing a mask airway, and the same thing applies as far as kids and your oral airways and sizing. Like you can tell, like for this little kid here, this pink one would be entirely too small for him. You'll want something bigger like this black one, how it measures up a little bit better to get to the back of their throat. Their tongues are very large when you come to the pediatric population, so you definitely really need to get that tongue out of the way. But as far as the mask, when you're masking someone, the other thing to remember is that you do want to have a good fit, like what Kim was talking about, but to get that good fit, you don't push down on it. You don't want to push down on the face to get that good fit, because you're just basically pushing the chin and the tongue and everything else into your airway, so you're just occluding it more. So when you're doing it, you want to pull everything forward. You're basically pulling that face into the mask. So you use these fingers a lot. You get kind of back to that bone back there to help pull everything forward, and then you can just kind of use that to get everything where it needs to be. So if you're masking, you can do it either left-handed or right, but just have your pinky kind of where the back of that jaw is, and then use your other hand to back. But again, I'm pulling the face into the mask instead of pushing down. And that's true for adults as well. And I've got really small hands, so sometimes it's hard to get your hand all the way around, but you'll want to pull all of that redundant tissue up, pull it up into the mask. Does that make sense? All right. So I think that's all I have as far as placement, unless you guys have questions.